go. Much better. That's almost forgot to run the intro. Oh, I was moving stuff around this weekend, and so my camera setup is all off. Anyway, hello everyone. My name is Cameron Cowan. This is the Cameron Journal Weekly News Hour, and super excited to have you. It has been it's been a week. Let's get into it. So, a couple things have happened. Occurrences have occurred. Obviously the big news of the week is last, I think Thursday it was, Brian Thompson, the CEO of United Healthcare, was shot by an unknown assailant in Midtown Manhattan on his way to a shareholders meeting. As of today, just a few hours ago, our unknown assailant is now possibly 26-year-old Luigi Mangione, and he was arrested in Altoona, Pennsylvania. This man has already broken the internet. So, an early picture of him kind of started filtering around yesterday of a possible suspect. And now, here he is. And social media is exploding. One, because he's incredibly attractive. And so, the thirst accounts are thirsting. Right now, as I was going on, I was seeing a mugshot photo of him. And maybe we'll try to find that real quick. Because it's it's kind of a banger, to be honest. Let's see. There's lots of, oh, here it is. Okay. Yashar Ali can always be relied upon to, here, let's just screen share now. So this is the mugshot of the aforementioned shooter taken in Pennsylvania. And like I said, here's literally Twitter right now. It took me nothing to scroll. Like, here's the top of my feed. This picture of him hiking shirtless has been being passed around all day. And more pictures of him. People have been investigating his Goodreads account. And it just goes on, and people are comparing photos, and like I said, here's the mugshot. And so it's just, yeah, social media has been crazy all day. Let's not talk about this man anymore for now. And we're, it's just, yeah. No, I want to go back to default. Hang on. There we go. Okay, so we're going to go back to default. No. We want to not be sharing our screen anymore. What is going on here? This is so annoying. Okay, but what if I just don't want to share my screen anymore? Anyway, while this all goes on, I will, that's kind of been the news, of the week. Hang on. Okay. There we go. Wrong control. Sometimes, so the software I use to stream with is called Ecamm Live, and sometimes, not all the time, but sometimes it has more buttons and does more things than I really need it to. And sometimes people, i.e. me, because I do my own engineering, get confused about what button does what. This was one of those moments. But irregardless of what transpired, This has been the big news of the week. It's been an interesting situation. And I think I might have a story about this. Yeah, I have the original New York Times article here about this. And it's been an interesting sort of um cultural moment, and it has become a cultural moment, which is why I think it's interesting. And it really demonstrates the the way in which the healthcare system has screwed people over a lot and often, and how unsympathetic people were to Brian Thompson, and the number of people claiming that people should be more sympathetic, blah 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 blah, and how, it's like, oh, he's a father, he's a family man, they've lost a father, all this type of thing. And everyone's like, yeah, but his company has denied claims at like twice the rate of other companies, so gotta fuck him. And it's funny because Ben Shapiro did a whole video about it, and his audience was kind of like, not the take, because he was kind of defending the guy. And everyone's like, not the take, dude. Everyone hates American healthcare, and this, some people even went so far as to be like, this guy's the right thing. And I think what's funny is some people have tried to make this a left versus right issue, like the left is cheering it and the right is not, but that's not true. But I mean, it's been interesting in terms of social media to watch people like posting their healthcare horror stories, posting their United Healthcare horror stories. Talking about Medicare for all, talking about how corrupt the health insurance system is. And I was mindful of this today because I spent an hour on the phone with the health insurance company today, trying to figure out some stuff for myself. And ironically, it's a subsidiary of United Healthcare. Yay. um and yeah, and so it's an interesting, it's been an interesting kind of thing to watch. um to be honest, I'm kind of two minds. There's one part of me that's kind of like, yeah, fuck that guy, sort of thing. But then there's also part of me that's kind of like, we also don't want people being shot in broad daylight, and murder is still generally bad, and that's what I wrote in my Saturday newsletter to subscribers. Which, if you're not subscribed, head over to CameronJournal.com, and you can sign up for my newsletter, which comes out every Saturday. It has the best of the Cameron Journal over the week, and it has my commentary on the headlines, personal updates about me, all that fun stuff. So it's a lot of fun, and it's a great way to get the Cameron Journal delivered directly to your inbox. So yeah, it's a lot of fun. It's really great, and but yeah, I was kind of like, I don't like. I mean, yeah, kind of screw that guy and screw health insurance companies, but do we want to live in a society where people are getting shot in broad daylight? No. One of the things I mentioned in my newsletter on Saturday was that this sort of thing reminds me, in the 1970s, Italy had what was called the Time of Lead, and it was a lot of protest against the government, and it turned very violent. There were car bombings, there were shootings, there were government building bombings. It became very dangerous. It didn't really move anything forward for the average Italian. Like, very little was achieved by this violent protest sort of thing, but it ended up being very traumatizing, and its nickname was called the Time of Lead. And I think, by and large, this probably isn't a good thing, but I do think, for better or for worse, given where we are at as a society, it is an articulation of the popular rage. It is it is kind of we're in this very strange moment as a society and as a country, and in a situation where it seems like nothing ever happens. um this has happened, and will it stop United Healthcare from doing anything? No. Will it successfully get more CEOs to ratchet up security and all this type of thing? Yes. In fact, I have a news story about that, but which we may revisit in the course of. I have a lot of tabs open, so we'll see how many we get to. Um but yeah, it's an interesting moment. Speaking of violence happening and the legal system, Daniel Penny, who was arrested on manslaughter charges for killing a man in the New York subway system, was found not guilty today. The jury had been deadlocked on the manslaughter charge, and the judge let them no longer consider it, and they found him not guilty on the rest of the charges. So he's going to walk free. Now that one's a little bit more straightforward. That's a very left-right sort of thing, with a lot of left-wing people saying, this is private vigilantism, and not so good, and a lot of right-wing people saying, yeah, this is the type of thing you should have in society, because this man was on a subway, he was threatening people, and Daniel Penny took it upon himself to kind of grab the guy. So it's yeah, old Chinese curse, may you live in interesting times. So yeah, so that's kind of what we're facing this week. I one of the kind of the other big thing that people have been talking about is the nomination of Kash Patel to head up the FBI. Is Trump's pick for the FBI. And he's already kind of a bit of a polarizing character. He was a former federal prosecutor, but he definitely has an idea to go after a lot of the people that were going after Trump, especially everyone connected to January 6th, including Liz Cheney and Adam Schiff and a bunch of other, people, sort of thing. It's definitely a bit worrying and a bit concerning, what may happen with all of that. I think some of it is a little bit overblown. He is kind of an insider because he's been a federal prosecutor, so he's not a completely untrained outsider. He's a real lawyer, but he has said some very controversial things, and I kind of wonder how weaponized against anyone they don't like the FBI is going to be, which I think should be concerning for everyone. I also there's also been a lot of conversation with the Department of Government Efficiency, or DOGE. Their latest recommendations for some of the spending cuts have come out. Now, I haven't heavily reported on their work yet because, one, they're not even a real department yet. Two, they're not even in power yet. And three, it's a lot of rumor. It's a lot of conjecture. But the latest thing is they're looking at things and programs to cut. Affordable Care Act Medicaid stuff is on the chopping block. Medicare may be on the chopping block. They're threatening Social Security. But the big news is they want to reduce the amount of government agencies from 428 to 99. And I don't know how judicious they're being in all of that. I don't know how much they necessarily want to work with Congress on all of that. But one of the things that is there that I think they will probably be able to do quite easily is stop doing programs whose congressional authorization has run out. And it's all in this goal to save money, shrink the federal government, shrink the federal budget, and bring down spending levels. I do notice that no one's going after defense spending, which is where I think most of the money should come from. People forget the top three expenditures in the federal government are, in this order: Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, and defense. And if you're going to try to cut $2 trillion out of the federal budget, you can't do that without cutting one of the big three. And I haven't heard a lot of anything about defense, so that only leaves Medicare, Medicaid, and Social Security. And what's done about Social Security is Social Security is a self-funding program, so they don't need to cut it to save the federal budget. They could just not consider it, sort of thing. Medicare and Medicaid are a different story. And some of the things they do want to do is they do want to, look at, benefit programs and all that sort of thing. But I think the other one that is being talked about right now that I think is most concerning, with the Trump transition, is the 14th Amendment and birthright citizenship. So one of the things Trump said he wants to do is he wants to end birthright citizenship. So if you are a child of and he was on Meet the Press on Sunday, so we have real footage of this. He said if you are a child of undocumented immigrants, then you would also be deported if you wanted to stay with your family. But if you were an American citizen and your parents were undocumented, they would get deported regardless of the citizen status of their children. Now, that has hit social media in a whole he wants to deport the children of undocumented immigrants. That's not quite true. That's not quite what he said. But I understand why people interpreted it that way. And it also, I mean, it also is, concerning that, if we don't have, sort of, I mean, if it ends up being a situation where people who are citizens but have undocumented parents get deported, which doesn't sound like that's what they want to do, but it's Trump, so who knows? Then that would be very damaging to civil rights in this country. And it would, it would really change, why people come here, why people immigrate here, why have children here, all this sort of thing. And how to become part of this country. I mean, there are millions of people who came to this country, had children here, who were citizens, and lived happy, wonderful, amazing, productive lives, like, Steve Jobs and many, many others. So that's all, kind of concerning as well. So that's kind of the latest on the whole Trump transition. But like I said, it's been a crazy news week, and we have more headlines coming up. So let's dive into some news. Let me change from this to this. Here we go. So, yes, so this is the police hunt for our super sexy gunman from United Healthcare. Oh, yes. Let's talk about this one. This is interesting. So, and we don't necessarily get into state level politics on this show a lot, but this one is interesting. So, in North Carolina, they just elected some new Democrat state level people in North Carolina, and the Republican legislature is basically stripping all these positions of power to prevent them from actually being able to do anything. And the state legislature passed this bill. The governor vetoed it early last week, and they overrode it. And so this is Senate Bill 382 in North Carolina, and it says prevents Governor-elect Josh Stein from appointing members onto the State Board of Elections by transferring that authority over to Republican Auditor-elect Dave Boliak, makes the State Highway Patrol an independent agency, and requires Stein to get the General Assembly's approval for a 5-year appointment. If a Supreme Court or Court of Appeals vacancy emerges, Stein must fill it in from a list of recommendations provided by the political party of the departing judge, thus preventing him from filling a potential GOP vacancy with a Democrat. Removes the seats of Wake County Superior Court Judge Byron Collins and Forsyth County Superior Court Judge Todd Burke. Collins and Burke have ruled against election law changes that GOP lawmakers have put forward over the years. So they're just out of a job. Prohibits Attorney General-elect Jeff Jackson from participating in lawsuits that undercut actions taken by the General Assembly. The bill says Jackson, quote, shall not, as a party, amicus, or any other participant in an action pending before a state or federal court in another state, advance any argument that would result in the invalidation of any statute enacted by the General Assembly. Prevents Lieutenant Governor-elect Rachel Hunt from chairing committees on energy issues. The bill also eliminates the Energy Policy Council, which has been chaired by the Lieutenant Governor. Prevents Democratic Superintendent of Public Instruction-elect Mo Green from appealing decisions made by the Charter Schools Review Board, and reduces the time frame voters can cure their provisional ballots from 9 days to 3 days. Provisionals tended to favor Democratic candidates and proved essential to Supreme Court Justice Allison Riggs' efforts to overtake the lead of Republican Court of Appeals Judge Jefferson Griffin. So, in addition to being the most gerrymandered state around, and in addition to the issues in North Carolina with county votes and all this type of thing, they're now literally changing the way the state government works to prevent Democrats from actually doing anything. And what's very interesting, and I think people don't necessarily realize, is that the Republicans, because they control so many state legislatures, do this at the state level all the time. I mean, all the time. It's insane. And I wanted to bring this up as an example because a lot of people don't understand. One, more governing happens at the state and local level than anywhere else. And if you're in North Carolina, this guy Brian Anderson is going to be your go-to guy. You should go follow him at Brian R. Anderson because he's great. More governing happens at the state and local level than it happens at the federal level. But the Republicans do this all the time throughout the country. I mean, the Wisconsin is notorious for this sort of thing, and now we have in North Carolina as well. And I remember finding that on Twitter, being like, I want to tell people about that. So, yeah. So go follow Brian R. Anderson if you're in North Carolina, because this is a lot of hot garbage. So, let's talk. That's international. Oh, this is a dumb story. Let's talk about this one now. So Bitcoin over the weekend reached $100,000 for the first time, and according to who is this here? Gautam, not gonna pronounce that. This fellow here, nice Indian fellow. That it's going to be the new age premier store of value, replacing gold over the next decade and becoming a permanent part of institutional multi-asset allocation and a standard for corporate treasury management. The prediction came after Bitcoin broke through the $100,000 mark on Wednesday. Crypto has surged since Donald Trump's election, with investors gearing up for a more crypto-friendly administration and regulatory environment. Such optimism has kicked off a wave of buy and hold activity across Wall Street. Bitcoin spot ETFs have accumulated over around $100 billion since they were launched earlier this year, making the funds the fastest growing ETFs ever. At the same time, business software firm MicroStrategy has been aggressively pursuing a Bitcoin treasury strategy, holding over $40 billion of the token on its balance sheet, and other firms following suit. According to Bernstein, ETFs have boosted Bitcoin's store of value allure by offering traditional investors a more convenient way to hold the token. Meanwhile, updated guidelines from the Financial Accounting Standards Board will make it easier for corporations to hold Bitcoin on their balance sheets, facilitating further adoption. So it's, yeah, and yeah, it says here, some on Wall Street expect Washington to embrace Bitcoin's store of value attribute, calling for the Trump administration to introduce a national Bitcoin reserve. Senator Cynthia Lummis has suggested that the government could buy more Bitcoin for this goal by selling Fed-held gold certificates. I only have one thing to say about this, and that is, one, I guess I wish I hadn't sold Bitcoin at $600 because, I would, I would have made a lot of money by now. But two, this is all Bitcoin. One, it doesn't exist. It doesn't. It's ones and zeros on servers. Two, it's an environmental disaster. Just putting that out there. And three, its whole value is predicated on only one thing, and that is that someone else will pay more for it. Gold has been a store of value and of currency for 50,000 years. I mean, that's not new, and it's rare. That's why it's valuable. It's hard to find. Not everybody, has it, sort of thing, and it's hard to find. Bitcoin, you can't hold it. And most importantly, and here's, I think, the crazy thing about it, is gold can be minted into coins and used as currency, and is all the time. Bitcoin, the network does not support ordinary, normal, everyday transactions. It can kind of do big stuff, but that's about it. And that's why it's becoming a store of value asset, is because it it doesn't, it can't actually function as money. And the only reason it has value is because somebody else is paying more for it. I've said crypto for a long time is tulips. It's a kind of a mania sort of thing. And the fact that it's going kind of into this crazy thing is a little bit odd. However, I think, in terms of Bitcoin is probably here to stay, because when it's going and starting to become this sort of institutional store of digital value, and I believe the last Bitcoins will be minted by the end of this decade, which basically makes it forever deflationary, as long as no one ever gets into Satoshi's wallet, which has $100 billion in it. it just doesn't function. But I mean, that's also the thing. Like, it's predicated on there's this mysterious person, Satoshi, who probably isn't even alive anymore. His wallet's out in the wind, and if that wallet were to be opened and that all to be sold off, it would crash the market. And we don't even know where that is, or if that exists, or who that person was, or anything like that. That's totally gone. It's just a lot of money laundering goes through it. You have all these old crypto scams running around. It's just I think it's a bad idea to be throwing billions of dollars into computer code on servers that cost a fortune to run. It just, yeah. I'm still I mean, I'm sad that I didn't stay in Bitcoin for selfish reasons because, money is money. But from a systemic perspective, it's still not good. Like, it's just not great. Um Switching to a completely, well, we'll end on the frivolous story. Let me put that over there. Let's talk about Pete Hegseth for a moment. So, um about 2 weeks ago, Trump announced Pete Hegseth, who is a Fox News host and former and veteran, to be Secretary of Defense, and that may be in question. This article's from Friday. Um, and it says that Pete Hegseth launched a public campaign on Wednesday to shore up faltering support for his selection as defense secretary, saying in a high-profile interview that President-elect Donald Trump told him, "I got your back, it's a fight, they're coming after you." But even as Mr. Hegseth insisted that Mr. Trump was urging him to fight, the president-elect appeared to be having serious conversations about picking Ron DeSantis, the Florida governor, as his one-time primary rival, to be defense secretary instead. Mr. Trump has told people close to him he likes the idea of giving Mr. DeSantis the job, saying it would be a big story if he resurrected Mr. DeSantis after defeating him. The president-elect has also praised Mr. DeSantis' ability to run the state of Florida, where Mr. Trump lives, and has mentioned that he's, quote, a Navy guy. Mr. Trump has privately mentioned Michael Waltz, the Florida congressman he picked as his national security advisor, as another option, pointing out that he would be easily confirmed by the Senate. The people close to Mr. Trump believe that Mr. DeSantis is his favorite alternative at this moment if he decides to abandon Mr. Hegseth. Speaking with Megyn Kelly of SiriusXM Radio, Mr. Hegseth dismissed the allegations of rape, sexual assault, and financial mismanagement and drunken behavior as nothing but a fiction created by Mr. Trump's enemies. He compared it to accusations leveled against Justice Brett Kavanaugh during his Supreme Court confirmation hearings. "This is the classic art of the smear," Mr. Hegseth said. "Take whatever tiny kernels of truth, and there are tiny, tiny ones in there, and blow them up into a masquerade of a narrative about somebody that I'm definitely not." I should also mention... Oh, we get into his mom in a minute. I should also mention that he, promised to quit drinking if he gets the job at one point in his defense sort of thing, but which was, social media's had a field day with that. But let's scroll down to his mom. So, Penelope Hegseth said in an email that, quote, her son belittles, lies, cheats, sleeps around, told a Fox News interviewer on Wednesday that she regretted sending the email and that Mr. Hegseth was no longer the person she lashed out at in 2018. "Pete is a new person," Mrs. Hegseth said in an appearance on Fox and Friends. She urged senators who will consider his nomination to listen to him now. "He's redeemed, forgiven, changed." Apparently, she's had a change of heart. So, it's Mr. Trump's allies fear that the public reporting about the president-elect's private conversations with Mr. DeSantis, which was published earlier by the Journal, has emboldened Republican senators to question Mr. Hegseth's viability. The most anticipated meeting of the day for Mr. Hegseth was with Senator Joni Ernst, an Iowa Republican and combat veteran who has spoken about being sexually assaulted herself. Ms. Ernst emerged from her closed-door meeting with Mr. Hegseth on Wednesday afternoon and told reporters that they had, quote, a frank and thorough conversation. She did not answer any more questions about Mr. Hegseth. Senators Kevin Cramer of North Dakota and Lindsey Graham of South Carolina, who are both Trump loyalists, have called the allegations against Mr. Hegseth disturbing, even as they say he deserves a chance to tell his side of the story. "We absolutely cannot have a Secretary of Defense that gets drunk on a regular basis," Mr. Cramer told the Washington Post, adding, quote, "I got to know that he's got that problem licked." Mr. Trump has made clear to people close to him that he believes Mr. Hegseth should have been more forthcoming about the problems he would face getting confirmed, according to two people with knowledge of his thinking. Mr. Trump's discussions with Mr. DeSantis about being defense secretary included a conversation on Tuesday at a service honoring 3 Florida sheriff's deputies who were killed in a car crash. But the number of people in Mr. Trump's world who dislike and distrust Mr. DeSantis and bitterly recall the campaign he ran against the president-elect is vast. Those people are discussing other options, including whether Mr. Waltz could slide into the job. While criticizing Mr. Trump in the past is always an obstacle for his appointees, DeSantis threw aggressive jabs at him during the primary. They included a flip line about paying money to a porn star, which was the basis for an indictment against Mr. Trump. Nothing else of important down here. So, that's happening. No new news as of yet that I've seen on the Hegseth nomination, but I wouldn't be surprised if he gets ditched like Matt Gaetz, because Trump's political instincts always go along with, if there's too much resistance and too many people saying too many uncomfortable things, then, you get dumped. However, I don't think Ron DeSantis wants to quit being governor. He's 2 years into his second term. And I think he wants to run for president again. And he probably doesn't want to be, saddled with the Trump baggage when he does that. So we'll see. We'll see about that. Before we go to, let's go to international news. And we'll start in Canada. So this was an odd story I found on social media. So up in Canada, the township of Emo, and the mayor are ordered to pay damages for a bad faith discriminatory refusal to make a pride proclamation. Obviously, you'll never guess who sent me this. It was sort of a right-wing, look at how terrible this is. Here we are. The Human Rights Tribunal of Ontario has released its decision in the application brought by Borderland Pride and others against the Township of Emo and 3 members of the council over the council's refusal to make a proclamation in support of Pride Month in 2020. The claimants were Borderland Pride, the Northern Ontario Pride Network, Douglas W. Judson, a director of Borderland Pride, and Katie Shoemaker, a resident of the municipality. Their claim alleged that the council's refusal to make the requested proclamation constituted discrimination in the provision of a service, contrary to the Human Rights Code, on the protected grounds of sexual orientation, gender identity, gender expression, creed, and family status. The claim also named Mayor Harold McQuaker, Councillor Harold Bovin, and Councillor Warren Tolles as respondents, and the 3-member majority of the council who would oppose municipal recognition of Pride. In June 2022, the claim went to a hearing before Tribunal Vice Chair Karen Dawson. In its decision, the tribunal ordered the respondents to pay Borderland Pride $15,000 in compensation. $10,000 of that amount is payable by the township, and a further $5,000 is payable by Mayor McQuaker personally. In addition, the tribunal has ordered Mayor McQuaker and Chief Administrative Officer of the municipality to complete, within 30 days, a Human Rights 101 training course offered by the Ontario Human Rights Commission. Oh, this is just sad. This is obviously from the Borderland Pride website. And they don't necessarily get into it here as well as they could. But apparently this all started back in 2020. The Borderland Pride applied to have this put out there, and the mayor said, no, we don't really want to do that. There's not that many gay people in this town. We don't really want to be celebrating that and promoting it. And in Canada has a different system, obviously, than we do. And they were able to go before this tribunal that has a power to, kind of like a court, to make decisions. And now here we are. It also says that they relied on testimony from Dr. Elizabeth Sawinek, an expert retained by Borderland Pride. The tribunal accepted the doctor's evidence that there, quote, is a link between public or political figures making discriminatory statements or hate speech and significant harms among those targeted by that discrimination. The tribunal also accepted that the testimony accorded with Borderland Pride's evidence of, quote, the many homophobic and hateful social media posts about Borderland Pride and the TUS LGBTQIA+ community, which appeared following the council meeting where the council refused to make the requested proclamation. Those comments included homophobic posts from the mayor's family members. And apparently he said at one point, quote, there's no flags being flown for straight people, unquote. And yeah, so it's $15,000, 10,000 by the city, and 5,000 by the mayor personally. And apparently he's not protected by the city for that, so he's gonna actually come out of his pocket for that, which is not fun. So it's yeah, I thought that was rather interesting in terms of, I mean, on the one hand, people fighting for their rights, but I think, public officials discriminating against people in their community, that's not a good thing. But I don't, as is true in so many of these things, I don't know that this is productive. I mean, obviously, this man is never, ever going to want to celebrate, gay pride. He's, every time he sees any paraphernalia, all he's going to be doing is thinking about the $5,000 and what real harm came of it. So your city opted not to do a proclamation. It's not the end of the world. It's a small town in Canada. What do you expect from these people? I appreciate it. I'm grateful for their hard work and their activism. That's wonderful. Like, yay for doing a direct action and getting this done. I just don't necessarily know that this is the best way to move the cause forward. Just putting that out there. This post I thought was very, very interesting. So this is a screenshot of an article from The Guardian in Britain. As we turn to international news, because we have big things happening in Syria. We'll get to Assad here in a second. It says here, in January, Israeli historian Lee Mordecai released a 124-page report with 1,400 footnotes detailing evidence of Israel's genocide. And some of the quotes in here were quite insane. Some of the most shocking incidents documented by Mordecai include a Palestinian woman with a child being shot while waving a white flag, starving girls being crushed to death while queuing for bread, a handcuffed 62-year-old Palestinian man getting run over by an Israeli tank, and an airstrike targeting people trying to help a wounded boy. The database includes thousands of videos, photos, testimonies, reports, and investigations of documenting the atrocities Israeli forces are committing in Gaza, where over 44,500 Palestinians have been killed during the war. Haaretz led its report on Mordecai's document, that's a newspaper in Israel, by drawing attention to footnote 379, which refers to a video clip showing a large dog eating the corpse of a Palestinian. Quote, why, he took the terrorist is gone in both senses, says the Israeli soldier who filmed the dog eating the dead body. A few seconds later, the soldier pans away from the corpse to the scene around him. But what a gorgeous view, a gorgeous sunset. A red sun is setting over the Gaza Strip, he says. And there were multiple organizations that says Heroes Help Compiled by South Africa, Forensic Architecture, and Amnesty International all refer to the videos. There's a link where you can read the whole thing. There's other reports. It's a lot. Like, when you go dig into the stuff in the journalism and the reporting, even within Israel about some of the stuff happening, it's devastating. I mean, there's just no other way to put it. It's devastating. It's so dangerous and violent and terrible. And yes, Israel has a right to defend itself, but we're talking about civilians. It's not like they're torturing Hamas. It's like they're torturing Hezbollah. Now, if you want to torture Hamas and Hezbollah, you'll be pressed to find anybody defending Hamas and Hezbollah. But even in the Arab world, you'll be pressed. But when you have civilians and all this sort of thing, that should give everyone pause about the actions of the government of Israel. And I will say it before and I'll say it again. Criticizing the government of Israel is not anti-Semitic. It's criticizing the government of Israel. I'm not criticizing Jews or Jewish people. They're lovely people. I'm sure this man is very nice. But I am criticizing the government of Israel that happens to be staffed and have Jews elected to it. But it is quite unacceptable what has gone on. And I think the best part about this is the more we learn, the more stuff about this we put out, the more we can bring to heal the actions countries do in war zones. Because here's the reality. Just because you're at war and just because you are trying to win an objective does not mean you get to run roughshod over the population. International law and rules of combat have been in development since the 10th century. And particularly following World War II, we set up a framework for how conflict should go to minimize its impact to civilians because they're not actively participating in the conflict. And the fact that the world sort of turns a blind eye in the name of not being called anti-Semitic to things Israel does against Palestinians is quite terrible. They deserve to be defended too. They're humans too. And I think oftentimes in these conversations we forget that. And I think that says more about us than it does about them. And, people could also say, well, the reverse is true. Hamas and Hezbollah send in, suicide bombers. We remember in the 90s, market explosions, bus explosions, all this sort of thing. I mean, they send, women and children with, suicide vests to go kill themselves in the name of Allah to kill and exterminate Jews, and they do not want Israel to exist and all this type of thing. That's equally wrong. One of the, mistakes we make about the Israel-Palestine conflict is we try to say, oh, this is the good, this is the bad. No. Both sides equally bad. Both sides equally problematic. But I can talk about the importance of preserving Palestinian civilians while separating out, and this is important, separating out the terrorist organizations that use them for cover. And that's the reality. Hamas and Hezbollah use civilians to cover up their own actions. They basically use the population as a fishbowl human shield. And when you study insurgencies and counterinsurgency intelligence and all this type of thing, you learn about how they do this. And so your first task when you're doing a counterinsurgency is to separate the insurgents, the terrorists, from the general population. You can do this one of many ways. One is controlling food, one is controlling supplies, one's controlling electricity, different ways that in some cases, like what they did in northern Vietnam, they would fence in an entire village and control who came and who went. And Israel does that with checkpoints with the Palestinians and whatnot to look for members of Hamas and Hezbollah and all this sort of thing. There's different things you can do. What Israel does is they basically are doing, what most people would describe as a genocide. They're just wantonly killing anyone who happens to be in the wrong place at the wrong time. And that's worth speaking out against. And we can speak out. We can do two things at once. We can speak out against the genocide while also saying that Israel doesn't need to get rid of Hamas and Hezbollah, because no one will be sad to see either of them go. Hamas and Hezbollah are two of the most well-funded, well-trained terrorist organizations on the planet. Getting rid of them will not make anybody sad. Trust and believe. All right, enough of that. Speaking of instability in the Middle East, this weekend, in another conflict where there's no good guys, the longtime dictator, whose father was also dictator, of Syria, Bashar al-Assad, fled the country this weekend for Russia, as Al-Qaeda-backed rebels took control of Syria's capital. So it says here, this is the latest development. President Bashar al-Assad of Syria arrived in Russia on Sunday after fleeing his country, according to Russian state media and two Iranian officials. It was a stunning fall for the longtime dictator who lost his hold on power to a lightning-fast offensive by rebels who took control of Damascus on Sunday. Mr. al-Assad's ouster was an earth-shaking moment in the history of Syria, which the al-Assad family has ruled with an iron fist since the early 1970s. Rebel factions have been trying to unseat him for more than a decade, upended his government in a matter of days after years of civil war. Many in Syria greeted Mr. al-Assad's fall with the hope after long living in fear of a government that had gassed its own people during the civil war and used oppressive tactics to silence dissent. But deep uncertainty over who will rule Syria next raised worries of a possible power vacuum in a country where competing factions have vied for territory against each other and Mr. al-Assad's forces. Our hearts are dancing with joy, Wallah Samela, 35, a resident of the Damascus area, said in a phone interview. We can't predict the future and anything is possible, but the most important thing is we got rid of this oppressive regime. Russian state media said that Mr. al-Assad and his family had arrived in Moscow and had been granted political asylum. The New York Times could not independently confirm that Mr. al-Assad was in Russia, which along with Iran had helped keep him in power. It also says here that the U.S. airstrikes struck dozens of Islamic State camps and leaders in central Syria on Sunday. As questions swirled early on Sunday over Mr. al-Assad's whereabouts, Mohammed Ghazi al-Jalali, Syria's prime minister, said that he would stay in the country and was ready to work with whomever Syrians chose as their leader. Mr. Biden and the family of Austin Tice, an American journalist who disappeared in Syria in 2012, said on Sunday that they believe he is alive and could be returned to the United States after rebel groups toppled Mr. al-Assad. We think we can get him back, but we have no direct evidence of that yet, Mr. Biden said. The United States has said it believed Mr. Tice had been held captive by the government of Mr. al-Assad, although his regime had long maintained it had no information about him. Israel's military said it entered a demilitarized buffer zone in territory it controls in the Golan Heights abutting Syria. The Israeli military, which is concerned about the sudden surge in instability near its borders, said it was acting to protect Israeli civilians. Iraq has secured its border with Syria, according to the official Iraqi news agency, which said on Sunday that the Al-Qam border crossing was closed. Now, so, yeah, the Middle East, always unstable, but we keep it fun. So, it's 46 minutes past the hour. Let's do the fun story. And I'm not gonna, I don't maintain an Atlantic membership because I'd get it through Apple News, but we're gonna read the first paragraph of this. So, the Atlantic is concerned again. The allure of smoking rises again. The cool factor of cigarettes has proved hard to shake, it says here. The allure of smoking has proved hard to stamp out. Despite the fact that cigarette use is at an 80-year low in America, smoking has unfortunately become cool again. At the New York Fashion Week show in February, some models accessorized their runway outfits with a cigarette. A clip of the TikTok influencer Addison Rae smoking 2 cigarettes is cut into her latest music video, which has more than 4 million views. The pop star Charli XCX, who's recently gifted a bouquet of cigarettes for her birthday, sparked one during her performance in Manchester last month, and has said that her Brat starter pack would include, quote, a pack of cigs, a Bic lighter, and a strappy white top with no bra. And then it goes on before it fades out to say that all of this is despite the fact that anyone born after 1964, when the Surgeon General pronounced that smoking causes cancer, should know that the habit is just about the worst thing you can do if you want to live a long, healthy life. And many people grasped this much earlier. Atlantic contributor James Parton wrote back in 1868 that it does not pay to smoke. When he quit tobacco, he had fewer headaches, enjoyed exercise more, and held a better opinion of myself. Although I admit that his prescribed method for licking the habit, drinking a good stiff glass of whiskey and water instead of reaching for a pipe, hasn't held up nearly as well. You know what? I'm honestly not surprised, and I'll tell you why. We're living in a time where everything is up for grabs. Rebellion is up for grabs. You have a lot of people who want to recall to an earlier, more conservative time where things, are less PC and all this sort of thing. And honestly, given the fact that the majority of people don't smoke, it is now basically a rebellious thing to do. And I say this as someone who vapes. And I've smoked in some form since 2004. I smoked cigarettes from 2004 off and on till 2013, then I switched to vaping in 2013. All this sort of thing. Like, it is, it has become, as people do it less and less, it has become a rebellious act. It's becoming a way to stand out. So it shouldn't be any surprise that certain youths who want to stand out and be a little rebellious or be a little edgy are going to pick something that's going to make you stand out in a crowd and be a little bit rebellious and a little edgy. That used to be smoking weed. Well, now weed's legalized. Smoking, sort of thing. And Congress just raised the smoking age to 21. They did that in 2019. And so, yeah, I mean, it's become this sort of, whatever is taboo to some people becomes cool and edgy. Such is the cycle of things, forever and ever, amen. And I didn't go into the whole story, and I could have found it in Apple News, but I didn't care that much. But I just thought it would be a fun thing to be kind of like, and in other news, the kids are smoking again. So, that's, That's a fun thing. So, like I said, it's a busy news in the week with the whole Brian Thompson thing. Now we have Luigi Mangione getting caught for shooting Brian Thompson. We have all Assad's out in Syria, all this sort of thing, and the kids are smoking again. And so, yeah, it's a lot. It's been a busy news week, and we'll see what Trump does with his picks. We'll see what happens with Doge. We'll see what happens with all this stuff. We are T minus, today's the 9th of December, so we are T minus, what, 32 days from Trump taking power. Um, there's a lot of fear right now. People are scared right now. We don't know what the future is going to hold. But I'll try to be here to walk you through it all. That much I can promise you. So, well, it's almost 8 o'clock. So let's hang it up for tonight. My name is Cameron Cowan. This is the Cameron Journal Weekly News Hour. If you want to follow me on socials and all this sort of thing, make sure to stop by CameronJournal.com for all the links. I'm at Cameron Cowan or at Cameron Journal pretty much everywhere. So Cameron Cowan is Twitter, um, Instagram, LinkedIn, Cameron L. Cowan on Facebook, or just search my name. All the Blue Sky is CameronJournal.bsky.social. So feel free to look for me in all of those places. Like I said before, at the top of the hour, if you want to get the Cameron Journal delivered to your inbox, head over to CameronJournal.com and sign up. There's a pop-up that will be right there. And you can sign up for the weekly newsletter. One of the things I do want to start doing here soon, as people as this kind of gets more popular and people show up a little bit more, is I do want to start doing kind of post news hour chats on Discord. So if you want to come hang out with me on the Cameron Journal Discord, go to CameronJournal.com, and at the top there's a bunch of links. Look for the little Discord guy, the little game controller with the eyes. And go join the Discord server, and we'll start hanging out and doing some chats as more and more people watch the show. So, all right, everybody, thank you so much. Thank you for coming to the Cameron Journal News Hour. I will see you next week. Good night.